And this is day 2 of the Financial Mastery Bootcamp. Super excited. Last night we went into all things mindset, changing those limiting beliefs, having that transformation. Because I'm gonna tell you, it's gonna have to be a transformation. Because guess what? Everything that you know, everything that you've done up until this point has gotten you to this point, and everything that you need is going to be something different to get you to the next level. And I'm a true believer that everyone here is looking to go to the next level in their life. There may be something totally different from others, and it's going to be personal. And it's something that you need to be able to share with yourself, look in the mirror, and know, guess what? You're showing up every single day, living your best and taking the action that you need to do. And so that's what it's all about. And so we'll get everything streaming here on Facebook and bring my slides up, and we will be good to go. Also, what's going on, Facebook? I can't see your comments. Feel free to jump in the Facebook group if you want to be able to participate, and we're going to get rolling. And we're going to be talking about how to master the foundation of wealth building when it comes to wealth in general. That asset is really real estate. When you start looking at all the benefits, there are some other opportunities out there, stocks, bonds, that should make up your portfolio. But tried and true is like, once I found out I can actually build a company around buying dilapidated houses and then refinance them and keeping them long term after I fix them up and building passive income, I'm like, there's no other business out here that I want to pursue outside of that. And so that's what we're going to teach tonight. So we're going to talk about the real estate market overview. We're going to actually look at what does it take. I'm going to give you guys the sauce when it comes to what you need to be looking at, to what comprises and makes up a really good real estate asset. And so we're going to give you all those parameters on the market, which are things you should be considering when you start talking about income, job growth, population, median income, someone that's there with their own median income that someone is owning, and just all that information. Then we're going to talk about the types of real estate investments: residential, commercial, specialized, industrial real estate, and what that looks like. And then we're going to dive into the numbers with the financial analysis and going through. And we're going to make it really simple, because I told you last night, real estate investing, it's all fifth grade math. It's adding, subtracting, multiplication, and division. And we're going to kind of give you a framework and let you get hands-on and build out and actually see some of these problems and how you can actually go through and break down the problem. So make sure you got your calculator, your worksheets, your notes, and we're going to dive right into it. And we already know millionaires use real estate to build wealth. When I was doing research for my book, Millionaire Real Estate Success Strategies, what they forgot to teach you in school, and one of the things that became apparent is that 90% of millionaires over the last 2 centuries were created through real estate. I'll say that again. 90% of the millionaires over the last 2 centuries were created through real estate investing. If you think about it, you look at the term landlord, that it came from the root word lord of the land, from way back in the medieval days, where you had the king and you had the individuals who were empowered by the king that collected rent and taxes, and they were called lord of the land. And that's where the term landlord came from. And so real estate has been around. This process of building wealth and ownership has been around for a long time, but a lot of times, and we talked about it last night, it's not readily taught. The process to go around building wealth and ownership, or asset ownership, is not really taught in schools. Think about it. Of all the things, worthless things that we've been taught in school, think about it. Everyone needs shelter. It's one of the, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's one of the top 5. You need water, you need shelter. That's 2 of them. And think about it, like, they don't even teach you how to buy a house. They don't teach you how your credit works. That's going to impact the interest that you pay on your house, your interest rate, your credit score. They don't talk about any of that stuff. That's fundamentally the number one driver for creation and wealth is home ownership, owning an asset. I can't even count up just the equity that I've been able to build up over the years with using my VA loan, 100% financing with no money out of pocket, buying my first 3 pieces of real estate as I moved around and with the Air Force. And then from there, then leveraging it up and start using hard money to fix and flip properties and keeping some as rentals, and then eventually getting into apartments. That it's a process, and you can truly build wealth if you know how to tap into the process and you know that you're resourceful. Mastering the Foundations of Wealth. Everybody knows Robert Kiyosaki. If no one has read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I encourage you to read it. That was one of the pivotal books that changed my mindset, that pushed me into that transformation that I say where I went from broke Johnny because I had a broke person's mindset. Nothing wrong with saying broke. Broke is something temporary. It's not permanent. And I realized that my mindset was jacked up and I had to make changes if I was going to change how I showed up in the world. And so that was one of the big things that took me and pushed me to think about entrepreneurship, being a business owner, understanding how taxes are levied on W-2 earners as employees versus business owners, and how the tax code is written to incentivize people to own small business, to provide jobs. Because guess what? The government doesn't want to be in a position where they're responsible for providing a whole bunch of jobs. And so I encourage you to read it, because that's how I made that transformation from broke Johnny to woke Johnny. I'll say that again. I had to go from broke Johnny to woke Johnny, because I had to wake up that, hey, everything that they told you when they gave that piece of paper with your engineering degree, that wasn't even the tip of the iceberg. It was a trap, because I thought I was secure. I thought I was good to go. But little did I know there's a whole nother alternative universe over here about investing, building passive income, building businesses, in a way to get away to buy my time back. And that's what we're talking about today. So, I'm going to bring the data. I'm going to share the data with you. But the big takeaway from this slide is Americans think long-term, the best investment is real estate. For 11 consecutive years, 34%. So that's about, 8% over gold, and then stocks and mutual funds. In the middle there, you can see Americans choose real estate as the safest investment. And this data here, the first one came from Gallup. So Gallup, they do a lot of surveys and polls. And then the middle one there came from Forbes.com. And then lastly, look at the last one there, 41% in regards to America's choice of the best long-term investment. Because if you really think about it, if you go back to the 60s and the 70s, like houses were pretty much more expensive than they were in the 70s, than they were in the 80s. And then in the 90s, it was more expensive than the 80s. And guess what? 2000, a house costs more, because guess what? Inflation. When we went away from the gold backing of the US dollar with Nixon, that we went off that gold standard, and now they just got an unlimited amount of money that they can just print. And so the money's not backed by gold. And with inflation, it becomes less and less worth anything. And so that's why we see everything where you could buy a tank of gas for $20, or you could go buy a Coca-Cola for 50 cents. And now it's $3.50. Or I saw a bag of chips last week was $6.99 at the grocery store for just a bag of Ruffles. And it wasn't even the big extra family size bag. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. But inflation is going up. That is with the money deteriorating and losing value. The Federal Reserve says they want to keep inflation at 2%. And for my clients, that I tell them all the time, like, if you keep inflation at 2%, where they tell you that they want to keep it, in 10 years, 2 times 20, you're going to lose. The dollar is going to be worth 20% less. And guess what? 9 times out of 10, depending on the market cycle, and we're going to talk about that, your property, your real estate, guess what? It's going to take 20% more of those same US dollars to buy your real estate. And if you don't want to sell it, guess what? You can go to the bank and they're going to say, hey, yep, your properties went up and appreciated 20%. We're going to give you 15% of the overall value in cash. We're going to give you new debt. You don't have to pay taxes on that money. And you can take that money and go buy more real estate assets. And that's the process. That's the strategy on how you can leverage real estate to build wealth. And we're going to break that down even more tonight as we dive in. There we go. So the first one we're going to dive into, make sure you get your worksheets out, is appreciation. Is the term appreciation. So overall, historically, real estate has appreciated between 3 to 5%. It's different in different areas. Real estate is local. You see a lot of the national numbers, but you really want to zoom in and understand how your local market is moving in regards. I try to do a monthly update on the Alabama markets, where we go through the top 4 major statistical areas, the MSA, so Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Mobile. And we walk through the data on a monthly basis to see for trends and see what's happening with the real estate market. But appreciation is a great avenue to build wealth that comes with real estate and ownership. We call it the icing on the cake because we don't buy just for appreciation, but we know historically over time that you have setbacks and you have areas where it stalls out and you don't have a lot of appreciation some years, but overall on the long term, because we're looking to build long-term wealth, real estate goes up between 3 and 5% each year. Leverage. Anybody know what leverage is? I'm going to help you out. There we go right there. So leverage is being able to finance a property, because if you go buy $1 million apartment building, you could walk in there with $1 million cash. If you were LeBron James or some high paid athlete or rapper, or you maybe inherited some money, or maybe you won the lottery the other day. You could go in and pay $1 million cash for the property. But if not, you're gonna go to a bank to provide the debt or provide debt in your capital stack to close on that building, where you're gonna put down 20-25% cash. And guess what? That initial down payment, it doesn't necessarily have to come from you personally. It could be a business partner that you bring on, or it could be private individuals that you raise the money from that you're going to pay back in the near term, in the future. Or it could also be a situation where you have the seller who's going to owner finance a portion of the purchase, and he's going to keep a note for you, so you don't have to bring the money to close. And he's going to say, "Hey, I'm gonna let you give me an IOU. You're going to pay me back this $150,000 that you were going to have to pay me as part of the purchase price. I'm going to keep it as a second mortgage, and you pay me back in 2 or 3 years after you had an opportunity to come in, make improvements, and increase the value, force appreciation by adding value to it, and then you refinance and pay my money back." And so there's different ways. That don't think about the only traditional way, you having to bring all the money to solve your problems when it comes to buying real estate, because you don't have to do that.
At that point, is it then becoming a missionary note added into the contract or into the agreement?
Yep. So usually what I would recommend, it'll be separate from the HUD statement. And so you would have a second contract that has the terms for that second note. So essentially you will have the bank that would be the first mortgage that's recorded, that you're making those monthly payments. And then you would have a second note with the seller who financed a portion of your down payment and said it gave you terms that you could pay it back over a 2 or 3 year period. And so that would be a second note that's kind of inferior to that first mortgage on the building. And so you would pay him out of the monthly cash flow.
Thank you.
For both of them. No, great question. Great question. Next, we're going to talk about cash flow. This is it. One of my sayings that I love is, hey, if it doesn't cash flow, let it go. We don't want it. We're not buying real estate on speculation. We're not gambling on thinking about, hey, it's going to appreciate. I'm going to buy it at $100,000 and it's going to be worth $130,000 next year. And I'm just going to hold it and not make any money along the way. No, we buy for cash flow from day one. And you can see that the average rental yields for the cash on cash return varies from 4 to 10%. And so on the low end, when you see 4%, think about brand new construction, downtown Atlanta, downtown Charlotte, LA, where you got brand new prime location real estate that's just being built or recently been built. Because it's low, you're going to have a low percentage for the cash flow because you're going to pay a premium for that price. But guess what? Your expenses are going to be lower because you're not going to have a whole lot of maintenance. You're not going to have a whole lot of issues in regards to changing out CapEx with improvements, or you're not going to need a new roof anytime soon or appliances or anything like that. So your expenses are lower, and people, when you start looking at larger institutions, that they buy these skyscrapers, they buy these large 300-400 unit complexes, and they're fine with the 4 or 5% annual return because they got to get some kind of return on their money. And they know that, hey, we're buying this property, it's not going anywhere. They're going to get cash flow each year. It's going to appreciate over time. They're going to get a huge tax write-off because guess what? Wealthy people, they hate paying taxes, and they're good at diverting taxes or not paying taxes at all. And they know over time that the residents are going to pay down the debt. And so for them, it's a great opportunity to get in at a low interest rate at 4%. Usually when you look at B-class, C-class property, that's when you get higher cash flow, higher cash on cash returns, 10% annually. And when you do seller type financing, like I just explained, just think about it. If you bought $1 million property and you had to put $200,000 down, but the owner said, hey, they're going to finance $150,000 of that down payment. And guess what? You only put $50K in the deal. And for that property, if it's making $5,000 a month after you pay all your bills, guess what? That's $60,000 of cash flow that year. And you didn't put but $50,000 down. You got over 100% return your first year in cash flow. Just because you only put $50,000 down, it's producing $60,000 a year. You're winning. And so that's the leverage that you have with banks and seller financing, where you don't have to put a lot of money down. And now that just pushes up your return, where you're easily getting 20-30% return on your money because you're not putting a lot down up front. And that's how you build wealth. When you're able to go and do that 2 or 3 times and over a couple of years, that you're really accelerating, and that velocity of money is steady increasing. Tax advantages. We love to not pay taxes. There's so many different strategies with that. My CPA, Larry, we're going to get him to come in after tax season kind of dies down a little bit and just share some of the strategies that I leverage and that other real estate investors leverage. But this is the benefits of depreciation that allows you to deduct 2 to 3% of your property value every year. And it reduces your actual taxable income. And we're going to get into that calculation and show you guys how to kind of go through and do that based off where you are in your tax bracket right now that you're in. Hedge against inflation. We know real estate is a great hedge of inflation. And I talked about this last night briefly. When you think about all the hedge funds and Wall Street banks and new companies that were created to buy real estate and build to rent, that they knew when we printed those trillions of dollars during COVID, that there was only one thing that happened: inflation. When you put that much money in circulation in the economy, everybody's got money and nobody can produce goods fast enough, it's going to drive the prices up. It's the law of supply and demand. And so they knew from 2008, during that period to 2015, there wasn't enough inventory. And so we were already in a housing slump. There wasn't enough supply. And now we put all this cheap money. We had cheap interest rates. And they knew that, hey, the next game in town to hedge against inflation was to buy real estate, rent it out, get returns. And that's why we saw that bubble that just started with so many people flooding to the market because they knew it was a hedge against inflation. Portfolio diversification. Real estate allows you to diversify from financial investments. So you're thinking about traditional stocks and bonds, you kind of diversify. So if the stock market crashes, usually your tenants aren't necessarily just going to everybody move out of your apartment and stop paying all at once. But you want to protect from that situation potentially happen. And we're going to talk about that in the market that you select and how you can kind of shelter yourself away, because there was a lot of people during COVID that just chose not to pay. And some municipalities, some jurisdictions left the landlord holding the bag and really didn't allow them to evict or enforce any of those rules to get back control of their property. But it reduces your overall portfolio risk. And you want to reduce your correlation of your assets. Whereas if something's going bad over here in Panama City, it gets hit by a hurricane, you want to make sure your asset in Charlotte is completely diversified, that if it's something natural disaster happens here, it's not going to impact them over there. It's not the same, state government. And so you're kind of diversified geographically for bad stuff happening that's going to impact your entire portfolio. And so that's what we mean when we start talking about diversification. Here we kind of have everything to just see how real estate stacks up compared against other investments. So looking at the high cash return, equity buildup, leverage, hard asset that you can physically go and touch and improve, tax benefits and inflation hedge. You look at stocks, it falls a little short there when it comes to being a hard asset. The tax benefits, it's kind of indifferent with leverage and high cash returns, as well as the bonds. And you look at the cash savings. Cash savings doesn't help you at all because inflation is just killing your buying power with savings. And we know the only way to build wealth is through investing and having that diversified approach when you start looking at stocks, bonds, and your real estate exposure. And you can see kind of the return on investment. If you took $100K, you bought a $100,000 house, you put $20K down, which was 20%. If it goes up 10% in a year, now your property is now worth $110,000. We talked about that down payment and the impact on your cash on cash return. So if you put only $20,000 down and it goes up 10K, you just got a 50% return on your money. Compared if you own $20,000 in stocks and it goes up 10%, guess what? You only got a 10% return. It only went up $2,000. And so that's the power of leverage with real estate. You're able to control a more expensive property without paying 100% for the purchase price of the actual property. And so being able to bring in that debt and bring in owner financing and other creative solutions with raising money with investors, that it allows you to control really, really expensive real estate without having a whole lot of capital in it, that allows you now to get untypical above average returns and returns on your investment when you do it the right way. And that's the thing, that you can do this too. Anybody here feel like they can do this? That they can. We're gonna go through. We're gonna give you the numbers. But do you feel like this is possible? After going through, we talked about the mindset last night. We're gonna break down the strategy, show you the calculations, how you can go through and make smart investments. Do you guys think that you can do this as well too?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's what I'm talking about. My man said, absolutely. Let's go. I'm in the right room because you can. You can. I'm here to tell you that you can. If you still don't think you can, go back and watch last night. Because that's the biggest thing that I want you guys to understand, is that this wealth it's a system, it's a process. That wealthy people aren't no smarter than you. They just got a little bit more information. and they're taking action. They're not giving up. They're not quitting, and they're resourceful. And because guess what? All of them don't have the money. They got relationships to go get the money from the bank, from investors, and bring the deals together. That is not all on them. They don't have it all figured out. I'm telling you. And now we're going through, and we're going to go through some different investments and kind of show you some of these key metrics that you should care about as an investor. So grab your calculator, grab your worksheet, your notepad, and we're going to go through it. I want you guys to kind of say, hey, is this a deal, no deal? Because, some people, like I showed you, some people may be good with a 4% cash on cash return. When you start looking at somebody who has $100 million, they're like, hey, we just want to get 4%. We got to get something return on this money, because it's not a whole lot you can go buy and spend $100 million all at one time. And then others like, hey, I got 30,000. I want to invest. I want to get about a 10, 15%. I need to get more than just 4% on my money. So you guys decide. So we got a scenario here. $200,000 house. We put 20% down, which was $40K. We're going to finance it with a mortgage at 6%, over 30 years, and it's generating $1,500 a month. And now we're going to go through a couple different scenarios to take a look at with that. We're going to look at the appreciation. So if this property goes up it goes up 30% over 10 years, after 10 years, what is the property's new value?
330.
What is it? So that's it. We're going to look at it. So 30%. So when we talk about a percent, we know we're going to multiply by a decimal. So it's simply just $200,000, the value of the property when we bought it, times 0.3, which represents the 30%. And then guess what? When we get that number, we're going to add it to 200,000. Anybody know what 200,000 times 30% or times 0.3 is?
60,000.
60,000. Let's go. You're right. It's 60,000. And so we added that to the original purchase price, and now the new value of the home is 260,000. So in 10 years, we've got our principal back. What's that? 150% return. We got our 40,000 back plus 20,000 over that 10-year period. So that's how you calculate the appreciation. You look at the time frame and you go through and you do the math and say, hey, if it goes up this much in this year, this is how it's going to be in regards to the new value. But then think about it. Over these 10 years, your resident has been paying down your mortgage. So now you bought it for $200,000. You put $40,000 down, and your original mortgage was $160,000. And now after 10 years, you probably owe like $130,000, $135,000. So now you got over $100,000 in equity. You're sitting on like $130,000 in equity in that property in just 10 years. And this is how you build wealth. Now think about if you did this as soon as your child was born, in over 18 years, and going through this process. You bought this house, put $40,000 down. You bought them a property as soon as they were born. Now, over 18 years, you're paying down the rent. They're renting it out. You're paying down the mortgage. You're getting $200-$300 a month cash flow. And guess what? Now they're 18 years old. You hand them over the title. It's like, hey, this property now, 18 years later, is worth $350,000, and you only owe $80,000, $70,000 on it, and you give that property to them at 18 years old. Now, guess what? They can sell it. They can go get a home equity line of credit, pull out $120,000 to go to school, and keep the cash flow coming in and own it. And at the same time, you've been getting tax write-offs all this time too with the depreciation. And so these are the benefits and different strategies where you don't need the Coverdale plan to save for school. Like, hey, I'm gonna just buy a piece of real estate, put a down payment, I'm gonna take care of it for 18 years, and then I'm gonna deed it over to them, and they can figure out whatever they want to do. It's gonna pay for their school. They don't want to go to school. They got seed capital they can go start a business with, or whatever they want to do to tap into the equity in that investment property because they own it, they control it, they own that asset. All right, what's the next one we're gonna go into? So that was appreciation. Let my computer catch up here. And the next one we're going to dive into is cash flow. I love cash flow because this is like the number one metric when I'm looking at like, hey, what's going to be my cash on cash return? So looking at the same example, now we're going to calculate the cash flow. We're going to take the annual cash flow. So the money we make each month times 12, that's going to give us our annual rental income. And then we're going to subtract the annual expenses. So in this case, we got an annual rental income of $1,500 times 12 is $18,000. And then our expenses in this case that we said was 40% of the rental income. And so with that, 18,000 times 40%, which is 0.4. We're going to turn it into a decimal. So 0.4 times the 18,000, which was our annual rental income, gives us an expense number of $7,200. And we know we were also paying our mortgage each month of $1,500 times 12. And so now we look at our annual cash flow is 18,000 minus the 7,200, which now is 10,800 or 80,100 when we look at that for the annual cash flow. So it will be 10,800 because we know we started with only 18,000. So definitely it would be no way that it would be able to get to 80,000. But that's the calculation that you would go for, is going through and subtracting from your income, your expenses, and then looking at what's left over. And now with this, we had a mortgage, so we had to make that payment. And so now we would look at, with the expenses ratio, what's left over at the end of the year based off that. Tax advantages. So we talked about depreciation. So think about it. Real estate is the only asset that we know. We talked about how it appreciates every year. It goes up over time. And guess what? In the eyes of the IRS, when you buy real estate, they say it goes down in value every year. It depreciates. It becomes worth less every day. It's a phantom write-off. The property's going up in value, but from the IRS standpoint, they say, hey, we're going to let you depreciate it over 27 and a half years. I have no clue who came up with 27 and a half years to divide it by. But essentially, you subtract the price of the land, whatever the land's worth, and then now you take the value of the actual structure, the building, and you divide it by 27 and a half years. And you end up with a number. And now you multiply that number by whatever your tax bracket is, that percentage. So if you're in the 25% tax bracket, you would just take your depreciation number and you will multiply by 0.25 in this case. And so you're saving a little bit over $1,800 annually from owning this piece of real estate. And the crazy part with this is when you get in commercial real estate with apartments, when you get bonus depreciation. And bonus depreciation says all the components that have a shelf life of less than 15 years that depreciate on under 15 years, they break it out. Whereas they're saying, hey, you're not going to have to depreciate the whole 200,000 under 27 and a half years, but we're going to give you 80,000 of that 200,000 in the very first year, where you can depreciate 80,000 in year one instead of 7,000, because we're going to pull everything that has a shelf life of less than 15 years. We're going to accelerate it and bring it all forward. And now you're going to have an $80,000 tax write-off your first year. And if you don't use it all, it just rolls over to the next year. And so that's the power with commercial real estate with bonus depreciation. And I know that the Senate and House have proposed bringing it back on because it was tiered off. It started tapering off in 2022. It went from 100%. It was 100% from 2017 when they passed the last tax bill. And it was 100% all the way to 2022 when it went to 80%. This year, it was scheduled to go to 60%. But they past legislation. I got to check and see if it was in the bill, because Congress just passed the budget a couple of weeks ago to see if they actually made it through, that they were going to bring it back and reinstate that 100% bonus depreciation, which is a phenomenal way in order to save money on taxes. Because guess what? If you go in, we look at my 18 unit as an example. We bought the purchase price was $1,050,000. We had to put $210,000 down. And our first year tax write-off was $183,000. So we nearly wiped out all the money. If you had took money from your W-2 job and bought that apartment and put it down as a down payment, if you made $210,000, you only be responsible for paying taxes on roughly, what is that math? $33,000 of that money. And so it's a great hedge against paying taxes and building wealth. And we know everything else is going to appreciate and go up over time. It's going to give us passive income, and the residents are paying down our mortgage. And we just got a great tax write-off for investing that money instead of just going and spending to go buy another car. That's going to be a depreciating asset that's losing value. And so that's what it's all about, is being able to build wealth with real estate. So now we're going to dive into some of the market cycles. So this right here shows you the cycle that real estate goes through over time. You have recovery, you have expansion, you have hyper supply, recession. That usually without fail, it's going to be going through one of those cycles at any given time. Anybody want to take a stab at where we are right now in the cycle?
Mm.
All right, my man threw up 4 fingers. You're right. We're right. We're somewhat in a recession. Some call it a rolling recession. The term recession, like it's not a recession until you lose your job. That's what people say because like it's really it didn't until it hit home. It's really not a recession if you hadn't lost your job. But you go through recovery. Is one phase where you look at decreasing vacancies, low construction rates, low rental rate growth, and moderate absorption. So I would say right now we're in for, and we're about to probably start moving into recovery. We'll see how the interest rates with the Federal Reserve works and how long they stay. But if they start doing rate cuts and we start seeing the mortgage rates drop down, then we're going to see a lot of pent up demand coming. And guess what? The inventory isn't going to be there to meet them in most situations. That you have places like Austin, Boise, Idaho, Atlanta that has a lot of construction, Nashville. When you think about it, when you travel to some of these cities, when you're going through downtown, look at the skyline. See how many cranes you see in the skyline, and that's going to let you know how robust the market is if you see a lot of new construction, a lot of new development that's going on in your market. So recovery, those are some of the tenets of recovery. Expansion, you're going to have decreasing in vacancy, moderate to high construction rates, moderate to high rental rate growth, moderate absorption. We had all that during COVID because guess what? Nobody had vacancies. That construction was booming during that period. Even though logistics supply chain was all screwed up, that there were still a lot of people that were actually building real estate. You had high rental rate growth. The rent was crazy. It was shocking. When we underwrote our 18-unit deal we bought in June of 20, which COVID kicked off March of 20. We had underwrote at a market rent of like $850. By the summer of 2021, going to 2022, that rents were around $950, $975, just because we had a lack of inventory and it was a lot of demand. And then you go into hyper supply. You have increase in vacancy, moderate to high construction rates, moderate to low rental rate growth, and low absorption. And so it's a buyer's market then. When we just talked about the previous two quadrants, number 1 and number 2, there was time for sellers to sell because if you command, because you have the inventory, you have the asset, and it's a lot of people looking for your property and it's limited supply. There's not a lot of real estate on the market. And so now you start to transition into a buyer's market and you go into number 4 with the recession, increase in vacancy, low construction rates, low to negative rental rate growth, and low absorption. That's where we are right now. Right now, if you look at it's hard to get a construction loan right now. Banks have tightened up credit and lending just because the Federal Reserve rate has went up. There's uncertainty in the economy, what's going to happen, so banks stop lending. And so you look at rental rate growth, rent rate growth has stopped. It has pretty much stopped in a lot of areas just because there was so much building happened over the last 3 years. And now you have thousands on top of thousands of units coming online that people need to move into. And so now you see more and more capacity coming online and it's pushing down the rental rate because people have options now because there's a lot more capacity for them to choose from. And then you have low absorption that people aren't moving in. When you start seeing people do concessions, they're going to give you 1 month of free. They're going to give you half of the security deposits and entice you to come to their property versus the other property. And you'll see a lot of that starts going on. So we talk about the trough. We kind of walk through these. This is the bottom of the market cycle. Prices stabilize or begin to increase slightly. I think right now prices are starting to stabilize. We're not going to have a crash of 2008 just because we're not going to have adjustable rate mortgages. There's not going to be a lot of foreclosures. People, their mortgage payment isn't adjusting, going up 30, 40%, and they have to sell or go in foreclosure. Then now the majority of Americans, I think it's like 90% have less than a 6% interest rate on their home, and it's a fixed 30-year mortgage. So they don't have to sell. They're not having a lot of pain. And we know that housing prices have appreciated easily 20, 30, 40% in some areas over the last 3 years. So people are sitting on a lot of equity and they don't have to sell and they got great interest rates. And so that's where we're going to be in this situation where it's going to be hard to build up inventory because a lot of builders are slowed down with them not being able to get lending over the last year. Expansion. So once everything kind of settles out, the market goes crazy. Interest rates come down. Guess what? Prices start going. Transaction volume goes up. At the height of 2022, I think there were 6.5 million transactions that happened. And for 2023, I think the number was a little bit over 4 million. So there was over 2.5 million transaction decrease just because when those rates rose, it pretty much just stopped. It stopped everybody in their tracks. And so now when you go into expansion, you start seeing the economic growth, low interest rate environment, and favorable demographics that drive up the price of real estate. And then you see hyper supply. You hit the peak that all things must come to an end. And now you start seeing demand is slow. This is the time that you want to get out. You want to get out of the peak. You want to sell that property at the top. And then if you want to, when they foreclose or something happens, you want to buy it again at the bottom. Whereas I forgot what the name of the business was, but the guy, he did an exit. He took his business public. I think he made like $700 million. They started moving forward. The company screwed it up. And now I think they were doing a lot of office space, flex space for entrepreneurs to come in and rent space, rent desks, things like that. And so they had a real large real estate exposure with properties. And we know during COVID, everybody started teleworking. They didn't need to go use the office space. And so now I heard that they filed like bankruptcy and he's buying the business back for like 150 million. So he sold it, made his money, 700 million. Then like less than a year later, he's coming back and actually buying it for 150 million, which is pretty cool when you think about it. But that's kind of how the cycle goes, that things change and you have to be flexible with your business in order to survive those changes in the economy. In this phase, the market begins to cool down. We know last year we talked about it. The market cooled down when interest rates shot up. People weren't trying to buy. It leads to a decline in prices in most cases. But we see that right now the U.S. economy has been resilient. We haven't seen a large uptick in unemployment. We haven't seen prices really drop. And if you were sitting in a couple of weeks ago and I was talking about Alabama in the market, that we've seen that in most of the across the state that everything has kind of went up or appreciated 1% to 2%. The prices have increased from where they were last year, even though interest rates have rose, that prices have still gone up just because there's a lack of inventory in most U.S. cities right now, especially a lack of affordable inventory. That we see houses above the median income price that are staying on the market a lot longer, but you're still starting to see bidding wars on houses that's priced below the median sales price in the areas. And so that's what we kind of walk through. You guys can kind of go back and dive that up, but kind of looking at the pros and cons of the buyer's market. You have a lot of homes for sale in the buyer's market, but few buyers. Homes stay on the market longer. They have more power to negotiate lower prices. Buyers have many options to choose from, and prices may go down as sellers compete. When you have a seller's market like we had back in 2020, 2021, going into 2022, few homes for sale, but a lot of buyers because interest rates were extremely low. Homes sell quickly. And then with that too, you had a lot of people moving from California, New York City. They were moving down south. They could telework. They didn't have to be in the office. So they sold and moved from these high price areas and went to the south in order to take, if you sell a house for $1 million in California, you go to Charlotte, you can buy a $400,000 house and have a whole lot more land. And so people having a lot of access to cash ran up prices in a lot of these areas where there was a lot of job growth and opportunities. And they had destinations where you could go to the beach, you could move to Florida, and you could be close to Disney World, whatever you wanted to be. And you could still work in Silicon Valley in California and get your high paying job, but live in Florida. Sellers can ask for higher prices. Yeah, shoot. Go ahead.
So would you say that today there's like a bidding war that's taking place today? Because I was speaking with broker and that's the way they feel, that there's bidding wars actually happen now and that there really isn't enough property out there.
Okay, I agree. In certain areas, if you see like the Atlanta's areas where, and we're going to talk about this next, where you have the job growth, where you have the population growth like Texas, in certain areas like that haven't caught up and they haven't overbuilt, that when you start looking at $200,000 and $300,000 houses, there's not a lot of inventory for people to choose from. And so, yes, for those type of homes that you're able to see a lot of competition and multiple bids with people that's looking to buy and own in those areas. And then as you get higher in price, you see less competition, less people, because wealthy people that can afford $1 million house, they don't necessarily have to move and buy most cases. And if they're cool with where they are, they can look at it and wait. And so that's one of the things, one of the guys I follow, he talks about making disrespectful offers. Whereas that you can go buy $1 million house. He's like, hey, it's been sitting there for 6 months. I'll give you $800,000 or $750,000. Like, you take it, you don't. And so that's the thing where you can look for opportunities where you can come in and bid a lot lower as things sit on the market in duration. They kind of sit out there a lot longer. So you have options. But yeah, in a lot of areas right now, there's competition for affordable housing.
I think that's what it is. It's more along the lines of affordable houses where the competition is right now.
Yep, 100%. It's a bifurcated market. If you go look at your market, look at how many of the listings that's been sitting out there for a long time, the price value is over the median sales price for your area. And then look how long, you can tell your realtor to go pull this data for you and look and see homes that the sales price is less than the median sales price for your area, see how long they stay on the market. And I think you'll see a lot less days on market for the cheaper inventory than you will for the higher stuff. And so I think the higher prices, those homes that sit on the market for a long time, they're kind of towing the line for the broader national scale. And so that's why I say real estate is local, is local, is local. You want to dig into your local numbers and look and kind of see what's going on, how's it moving. So in this case, I would say stay away from flipping high price luxury homes. And if you're going to be flipping, you want to flip affordable housing. You want to get the cheapest house in a good neighborhood because there's going to be a lot of demand going there. And I would say you may even want to look at going just a step higher than the entry level houses where you're looking at for like the buyer who's maybe mid management, that's looking for their second house, that's looking to grow their family, that's maybe in another suburb, whereas that now, they're able to qualify. They don't need down payment assistance and things like that. So you just want to kind of look and see with the numbers in your market and kind of dig in and make an informed decision on kind of how you're moving and navigating.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. With the seller's market, buyers face competition. They may need to offer more to get the home. And guess what? Fewer options for buyers, so they need to act fast. And so we know it was crazy in 2021. People were waiving home inspections. They were letting their earnest money go hard on day one, where something happened, they couldn't close on the property. They couldn't get their earnest money back. And so it was just a whole lot of craziness going on. And when you see all that going on, that's when you know, hey, something's a little fishy when that you may need to step back. So now we're going to talk about where to invest. So we know kind of the metrics we need to get, but where do I need to invest? So guess what? We want to follow the money. We want to follow the growth. We want to follow the job growth, and we want to follow the population growth. So if you can see the states there in the blue, they are growing. They are the top 10 states for inbound migration, which just warms my heart when I see Alabama with something positive when we're not talking about education. But I digress. When you see the positive there in the blue, those are states that you might want to look at investing in. And it's no surprise there. Texas is extremely growing. Tennessee with Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, Alabama with Huntsville, Mobile, Florida across the board from Tampa, Miami has been really resilient. Jacksonville, the Pensacola area. You got North Carolina with Charlotte, Greenville, Greensboro. South Carolina has a couple areas with Columbia, Greenville, South Carolina. And then you have parts of, Delaware as well, too. And then you got Montana and Idaho. And so now when you look at the goal, you have states where people are leaving and migrating away from. And so now you look at California, Alaska, New York, Illinois, Louisiana, that a lot of people are leaving those states and they're flooding to the blue states. And when you start looking at it, for example, Austin, Texas saw 20% population growth in the last decade. Guess what? If you got like 600,000 people in Texas, what's that? That's over 100,000, 120, 130,000 people moved there in 10 years. That's a lot of new real estate that needs to be able to support all those people moving there with the jobs. And so that's the thing you want to look at. Follow the jobs. And cities like Denver, Seattle, they've grown because of jobs in tech and healthcare. You got Amazon out there. You got a lot of research in the medical space as well, too. So you just want to look at some of these trends and see where you invest. Now, if you're in a state where that's great, that's not gold or blue, there are still deals out there. There are deals in every market. You just got to get it for the right price. And the thing is, like, it doesn't have to be Austin and Atlanta and crazy growth and numbers. Like, you could be in New Mexico somewhere in Las Cruces and still get a 10, 15% cash on cash return on your deal. I'm like, I take that in every day, twice on Tuesday, because you're getting a 15% return. And we know if you're getting 15% return on every year, that you're going to be pretty much have all your money back in 6, 7 years? So 7 years will give you a little bit less than 7 years. You're going to get all your money back from the deal. And so that's the thing. If you're able to look at these returns in certain areas, now you look at how you can diversify your risk. You look at your cash on cash return, and you just manage the risk at that location. You may be in a town that has only like one, like where I grew up, it was the paper mill. You either worked at a paper mill or you drove trucks or you worked at the Piggly Wiggly or the gas station or the bank. And it was really limited. So if you own an apartment there, the flip side of that is, guess what? There's not building any new construction. So if you got a monopoly on it, you got the only apartment in town, you probably could do pretty good. But you just know you're not going to have a lot of appreciation because guess what? Your rental prices probably aren't going to go up over time a whole lot. But if you're cash flowing, you're buying at the right price, that doesn't really matter. Because if you're looking to hold long term, you're still going to be building wealth with it. So you really want to dig into the data, that you want to follow these trends, but don't shy away from where you are and the proximity of where you are, because there's deals everywhere to be had. So here we're looking at mapping your wealth, fastest growing cities. Jot this down, take a look at it. Baltimore, I was really a little bit shocked with that, but Baltimore's growing. Of course, we know about that bridge collapse. That was horrible. But you look at some of these areas here, DC's in there, Atlanta, Indianapolis, Riverside, California, St. Louis, Kansas City, Pittsburgh. I know I was talking with Leslie. She was talking about Pittsburgh. So that's a great area. Philly's on there as well, too, that you see. These are the fastest growing cities with jobs. And so you want to be there. As they say, Nashville, Tennessee has an unemployment rate below 3%. Hey, they're hiring in Nashville. That if you're looking for a job, you may want to move to one of these cities. Infrastructure law. So they passed this bill with the Biden administration where they provided $185 billion in funding for infrastructure and development. So basically go improve our roads, improve our bridges. And so this money is out there and they got to spend this money. And the crazy part is a lot of this money, it has set asides for minority business owners to get the work. And you look at Alabama got nearly $3 billion. California got 16 billion. So this was those congressmen, when they're up there, they're negotiating to bring this money back to the state. That's what their job is up there. They're up there, they're willing and dealing. And when they're putting these laws together, like, hey, hold on, you're getting 185 billion. I need to get $3 billion to bring down to my state to improve my roads. And now I bring this money to the state. And guess what? Guess who they're going to reelect? Because I'm bringing jobs. I'm bringing revenue to the state to spend this money to improve the infrastructure. And so that's how all this stuff works. But you want to just look at the money. There's opportunities here. They're renewing neighborhoods to bring in investors. And there's just a whole lot of information. I encourage you to get out to your city council meetings, wherever you live at, get plugged in on the initiatives that's happening at that level that they're approving and seeing where the business permits coming, the new construction permits, and see where that path of progress on where things are going. One of the huge indicators to go, this is a great hack that I learned last year, look for new schools. If you look where they're building new schools, that is a great place that you probably need to start looking at buying land, buying real estate in that area, because they do a lot of research before they commit to building a new school. There's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of people coming there for them to build a new school. And so that things like that you can look at, and now you can start moving strategically on where you want to invest your capital. How can you identify a good real estate market? Population growth. We talked about that. 1 to 2% is good. Job market, you want to have that job growth 2 to 3% annually. People are coming in there, and if they're coming in to work, they're going to need places to stay. Economic stability, that you want to look at the GDP, the gross domestic product growth rates, and you want to make sure that they're at least matching or exceeding the national average. I think right now we're around 2%. That if we hit a recession, of course, that would drop, it'll go negative. And if it goes negative, well, I guess if it would go negative for 2 quarters in a row, that would technically be a recession when that happens with the GDP growth. Infrastructure development, that you want to look for, like the skyline, like I talked about. You want to see, hey, are there cranes downtown? Are there new construction going on? Are they putting in new utilities, new schools going in? These significant investments in infrastructure, it lets you know where the path of progress is. If they build a new hotel, when you look at a new hotel coming in, they're looking 30 years in the future before they decide on where they're going to put a new hotel when you look at some of these chains. So you don't have to do the math. You just look at where the development is. One of the things that pushed me over the top, I heard Grant Cardone say this back in 2022. I was on the fence with the deal in Montgomery and was looking at it. And I was going, watching these YouTube and everything. And I heard him say, hey, I want to be where Publix at. If Publix right there, I want to be near Publix. I want to be near Chick-fil-A. If my apartment's right there, it's good. I already know. They've done the research and done the homework. And I was on the fence. I'm like, man, this is a good deal. Like, the area seems good, the price. And then I saw Publix was 1.2 miles. I said, say less, let's go. We're going to put it together. We're going to do it. That gave me the confirmation that I know. And so when you start looking at the investment that other businesses and franchises are making, you can piggyback off that to ride that wave of success. Housing affordability, examine affordability to housing, that you want the home price to income ratio around 3 to 4, whereas that you have affordability. That's what I love about Alabama. It's affordable across the state. Most of Huntsville is getting up there, but Birmingham, Montgomery, you get an average sales price is around 160, 165,000, and Mobile's a little higher, around 180K. But it's still affordable. That's what I love about it. You see areas like Mobile, they got the jobs coming in, the job growth with the shipbuilding business, with Airbus down there, we're building the planes. You have one of the fastest growing counties across the bay in Baldwin County with Fairhope and Spanish Fort, that they have a really, really good infrastructure and economy that's happening right there in that area, which is great for real estate investing. And then you want to have a rental market, that you want to look somewhere where the vacancy rate is below 5%. and you're able to get that 8 to 10% return on your money each year in that area. And then, of course, we want the icing on the top of the cake. We want that appreciation that we can take. And then regulatory environment. Like, one of the things that I tell people is like, hey, I prefer to invest in red states and with Republicans that are in control. And you use that as an exception because, like, Fulton County in Georgia, even though it's a red state, that they're having a lot of challenges with evictions. You have people who haven't paid for a year. You can't get them out the property and things like that you want to be cognizant to, because that impacts you and how you operate as a landlord when a COVID happens and you got people who don't want to pay that could pay, and you run into that situation. But, thank God, in Florida, they didn't play those games. They're like, hey, once your 1 year lease is up and you go month to month, if you don't pay, you got to go. And so, and the thing is, you have the free reign to work with people, but for people just to lock their door, to ignore you, don't come to the door, don't answer your phone calls, that they're not going to let that happen. Where a lot of people, like in California, there's people right now that still ain't got paid from during COVID. And it put a lot of people at risk that if you're just mom and pop landlord, they don't have the cash reserves, especially if you were living off that cash flow as your retirement. And now everybody just stopped paying because you were just a nice person. And now they feel like they can just save their money that they don't have to pay you. It could put you in a really bad predicament with that. And so you want to look at the regulatory environment, just kind of see how the landlord-tenant laws are and just how that works in your favor or not in your favor, and make sure you stay on top of it. This is one of the great reasons why I love having a professional property management company, to where they can deal with tenant issues. Like if you have a tenant that brings litigation against you, that they're right there with you. They have attorneys on staff. They can inform you and lead you and guide you through that process, versus you just going through a Joe Blow homeowner and you got a professional tenant who does this for a living, with going through and getting their way out of rent and taking you to court, and they'll take your shirt from you if you don't know what you're doing. And so that's the thing you want to pay attention to, is the regulatory environment and just understanding that. Building wealth through real estate. We talked about residential real estate, that is houses that you live in. And we looked at right now, 2023, that 5.64 million units were sold, with the median existing home price around, it rose by 14% in 2023. That's the inflation. We saw it. The price of houses went up 14% in 1 year. We talked about the average being somewhere 3 to 5%. In 2023, it went up almost 15% in 1 year. So if you owned $1 million house, it went up $150. $1 million apartment, it went up. If it went up 14%, guess what? That's $140K appreciation in 1 year with owning that apartment building. And then if it went 10% the next 2 years, that's what? That's another $200,000. So you done went up $340,000 in 3 years just because you owned the asset. You did nothing. You didn't improve it or anything. It's just, hey, the price of real estate went up because there's not a whole lot of new inventory. And that's where you just go through, and that's the icing on the cake with that appreciation that happens. And we talked about this already with the pros and cons with managing real estate. Some of the downside, you do have to management. It can be time consuming. I highly suggest you run it as a business and just pay that 10% to have a professional manager for you. And you have market fluctuation where rental demand can go up and down, and you just want to continue to manage that through the process. Next, we have commercial real estate. In commercial real estate, when you start thinking about some of the opportunities there, that you have warehouse space, but at the same time, it's kind of distinct away from residential real estate, where you see it had a 6% increase. One of the things that we see now, that office space is really, really hurting, as well as retail in some areas, where you see a lot of crime was happening, like San Francisco, New York. You see a lot of retail stores, they're pulling out of some of these cities, inner cities, and some of these areas where the stores are going away. It's like, hey, we're taking too big a loss. We got to leave this area. And so that vacancy is a lot of money that's lost. People aren't showing up. They're teleworking. They don't need to come into the office. And so certain facets of commercial real estate are enduring some pain right now. And they're going to have more pain going forward as you look and people look to maybe do conversions and things like that. But commercial real estate is another opportunity where you can invest your money and kind of diversify away from like residential. But you look at the retail spaces, warehouses, and then office buildings. On the industrial side, you have warehouse space. Think about Amazon. Amazon's leasing a lot of space for logistics, for storing materials, everything, that the distribution centers for a lot of companies, that they're moving a lot of freight and goods all across the globe. And so manufacturing facilities that they need a lot of place to store real estate. So if you get into this niche, that if you know how everything's going, you get into some of these areas where it's growing, all these jobs, and you got all the new corporations moving there, that if you can get into the industrial real estate space, that could be a powerful play. But guess what? The riches are in the niches. And I encourage you to kind of figure out what you gravitate to. What makes more sense for you? Specialized real estate. So when you start thinking about this, the senior housing sector witnessed a 12% increase in transaction volume in 2023. That is going to be a big one going forward as more baby boomers retire. More people are going to need senior living, healthcare facilities, student housings, and hospitality properties. That's going to be a need going into the future. I was talking to my sister today. She has a contract with one, it's not assisted living, it's physical therapy, rehab area, but she goes in and she sees most of the clients on a recurring basis with the client. She has a contract with them to come in and provide the cosmetology service. So cutting the hair for the men, wash, blow dry for the ladies, can do manicures, pedicures, and things like that. But there's different ways where if you can serve this demographic that it's not going anywhere anytime soon. And so being able to look at different ways you can leverage specialized real estate or cater your business to these demographics or for these individuals that's moving to these areas, that you'll be well off and positioned nicely for the future. So before you invest, I know we just hit the 9 o'clock hour, and I know we have the definitions here, but one of the big ones you want to look at, return on investment. I want to walk you guys through these. ROI is just a fundamental metric used to evaluate the profitability of investment. It's taking your initial investment and looking at how much you made on that investment as a percentage and understanding what that is. So in 2023 in residential real estate, it was 8 to 12%. It was a really, really good year. Commercial real estate was 10 to 15%. That's the thing that you look at with some of these asymmetrical areas. And I talked about it. If you cut your down payment in half, that you could double those percents. You could be making 30% on your money easily if you bring in some seller financing and bring in additional debt where you don't have to bring capital to the table. And that's the equation there. Just your profit for the year divided by the initial investment that you made and multiply it by 100%. And that's going to give you your return on investment for the year. Here's an example. So we had a $200,000 purchase price like before. The annual rental income is $25K and our expenses is $8,000. So our net profit was $17,000. Now, what's the ROI? So we made $17,000 this year and the initial investment cost us $200K. We divide it by 200,000 and multiply by 100%. And we get what, 5.8 or 8.5% return on our money, ROI. And for the sake of time, I'm gonna let you guys. I'll tell you. There we go. 8.5. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
8.5.
Exactly right. 8.5%. And that's, you just go through the calculation. Your annual rental income minus your expenses, what's left over, you want to divide it by your initial investment, and you got an 8.5% return, which is pretty good for most people. Cap rate. Cap rate is one, it's kind of nebulous. People go all over the place with cap rate. Some care about it, some don't. But for me, I just use it as a barometer to see what I'm paying in the area for an investment property, comparing it to other like-time buildings or properties in the area. And you're basically just taking the property's net operating income. And so that's the thing. You're taking like multifamily and comparing the income generated by this apartment, and you're going to compare it to the income that's generated from a similar apartment in a similar side of town with the similar amenities and a similar amount of units. And now you're going to divide it by the current market value. And so you want to make sure, like, hey, I saw somebody over here paid an 8% cap rate in this neighborhood, and I'm buying it for 10%. So I'm like, okay, that's good, but what's the additional risk that I'm buying? Is there something else going on? Is it a problem property? Is it a high crime area? Is there something going on, some type of distress on why I'm paying a 10% cap rate and being is a little bit cheaper? Or vice versa, like, hey, if they bought an 8% cap rate and I'm looking at the deal and I'm paying 4% cap rate, it's like, okay, let me go back and reassess my numbers and see what I missed. Because at the end of the day, if you're getting a commercial loan, you're still going to have an appraisal, and they're going to be looking at doing an actual comparison of those properties. And so one of the things that you have to look at is like, okay, if the lender sees that you're buying at a 4% cap rate, they're like, hey, well, we're only going to give you a 50% loan. You got to bring the rest of the money to the table if you want to buy this deal at this price. And so that's what we're looking at with the cap rate. So it's the net operating income divided by the property value. And guess what? If you have the NOI, you can take the net operating income that they give you from the apartment building and then divide it by what the purchase price that they're looking to charge you for the purchase price. And then that'll tell you what's the cap rate that you're paying. So you can work that kind of backwards as well too, just depending on which two variables you have. So this one, the property was valued at $500,000. The annual rental income was $60K, and our annual operating expenses were only $15,000. So that leaves $45,000 for our net operating income. And so we're going to simply divide that by the property value, which was $500,000, and multiply it by 100%. And we get 9%. So the cap rate for that income that's produced from that building is a 9% capitalization rate. And so now you look at that, you can compare that to other apartments, other buildings in the areas like, hey, is that good or is that bad? And now it's just a metric that you can take and put it into your notes and you compare. That's just one piece of information with a host of others that you're doing your due diligence and looking at that goes into you making an informed decision on whether or not this is a good investment moving forward. Cash flow. So we're going to talk about how to calculate cash flow, which we've done that multiple times already. It's just the rental income minus the operating expenses and minus the debt service if we have a loan. So we got to pay all our bills after the monthly rent. So we collect $3,000 of rent. We subtract out the expenses. We subtract out the mortgage payment. And then boom, we're left with $1,000 left over after paying our expenses and paying our debt service in this example. So 3,000 minus 1,200 minus 800 equals $1,000 cash flow for that. So this one with the whiteboard, we're looking at a $300,000 duplex, and we're going to go through and let you guys calculate the return on investment, cap rate, and cash flow. So we got $300K, which was the purchase price. The annual rental income is $36,000. Annual operating expenses is $10,000. And then the mortgage payments each month is $1,200. So we're going to start with the ROI. I'm going to let you guys kind of go through that based off those numbers and let you calculate that quickly. We can wait about 20 seconds before anybody shout out the answer. Let everybody get a chance to work it out. And I see a couple questions here. So I'm going to go through it. Once we wrap up, I'm going to answer those questions for you guys. See here going in the chat. All right. So anybody, what did you get for the return on investment? While you're working, here's the process over. You can go and calculate the cap rate and cash flow as well too. So cap rate, you're going to take the net operating income and you're going to divide it by the property value and you're going to multiply it by 100%. So we know that the one right here with the NOI was annual rental income. So 36,000 minus 10,000. And in this case, the mortgage payment was, we didn't do the mortgage payment for the year. So in this case, the mortgage payment was going to be
14.4.
Yep. 14.4.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. There we go. Thank you, gentlemen. Cash flow equals rental income minus operating expenses minus debt service. So what would be the monthly cash flow on this one? I see the annual rental income so the annual rental income in this one is $3,000. And so the monthly expenses, we'll just call it $800 because we did it annualized. We didn't put it down for monthly on this one. So essentially it would be $3,000 minus $800. So that leaves $2,200 minus the mortgage payments of $1,200, which would leave $1,000 roughly on that one. And so now if you had to compare different scenarios in this one, that you would calculate And we talked about this, like you're just comparing two different properties that you want to see the cap rate, or in this case, the return on investment to compare. So now you're taking the metrics and you calculate your return on investment and making an informed decision. Now it's like, hey, if I can buy this one for $250,000 and it's going to produce $20,000 in income, now I can compare this to property B that I can buy for $100,000 more. That's going to make $10,000 more annual income. And now you can see, okay, what's the better return on investment when I look at this scenario? And so in this case, you want to do the math. Oh, we didn't even put I think you guys don't have to write that one, and we're going to have to give you guys the answers on those. And so this one here, we'll work it out, the one for the return on investment, then we'll do the cap rate next. So with this one, so 250,000, so your net profit is 20K, and your investment was 250,000. So we're going to simply divide that 20,000 divided by 250K and multiply by 100. So that's a 8% return on investment. Then for property B, we're going to take that profit of 30,000 and we're going to divide it by 350,000 and multiply that by 100. And that gives us 8.57. So a little bit better. So property B has a little bit higher return on investment in this case. Looking at this next one, we're going to compare the cap rate for this property for two commercial properties. So property one, X, has a net operating income of $80,000 a year and the property value of $1 million. Then property Y has a net operating income of 120K and a value of 1.5 million. And so now we're going to simply, for property X, we're going to calculate that cap rate, and that net operating income is 80,000 divided by the value of the property, which is $1 million, and it gives you 8%. And you're going to take that 0.08 times 100, and it gives you 8% is the cap rate for property number one. For property number two, it's 120,000 divided by 1.5 million, which gives you 8%. So 0.08 times 100. So in this case, both of those are 8 cap. They're 8% capitalization rate in those areas. That could be bad or that could be good. If you could buy 8% cap rate downtown Los Angeles, that's probably good. But if you're buying in a war zone where there's high crime, there's a lot of murder on the wrong side of Birmingham or Atlanta, and an 8%, you're probably overpaying. You probably need to buy the 13 cap just because there's so much crime. You're going to have a higher vacancy rate. You're going to have more people that for your delinquency that's not going to pay. You'll have a lot of turnover. Your expenses are going to be higher. You need to buy at a higher cap rate. So it's just a piece of information. It's a metric that you can look at and apply to everything else with the market, the area, everything else that you have from a data for is the income being produced, the expenses, how much money you have to put into it, and everything. Now is just a piece of information that you put into everything, and you go through and look at all of it together and say, hey, is there anything that tells me that I shouldn't buy this property or why this is a bad deal at the end of the day when you're walking through each one of these things? Looking at the market statistics, just for the median home price, commercial real estate appreciation, and just the multifamily occupancy rate right now, 95%. And just looking at some of those metrics there. And then just kind of rule of thumb that we're going to wrap up that the 1% rule. So something you can look at really quick, that this rule suggests that the monthly rental income should be at least 1% of the purchase price. So if you buy a $200,000 property, your rental income should be at least $2,000 or higher. So 1% of 200,000 is $2,000. And so that's what you want to always look at, that you can look at really quick. It's like, hey, I'm buying this for 300, this apartment for 400 or for, let's say 400,000, but my monthly rental income is only 3,000. That's not a good deal. But if it's 6,000, because I can rent it out by the bedroom to students and I can get $6,000 a month, it's like, hold on, let's go ahead. We got to dig in this real quick and get this under contract because we know that's a pretty good deal. So that's the 1% rule. Let's see here. Next, we're going to look at, what's our next rule? It's not the rule of 72. There we go, the 50% rule. So one of the things that we say is, of course, when it comes to your rental income, that just kind of a broad brush when you're underwriting, because a lot of times when we deal with mom and pop apartment owners, we don't get the data. Like their books are horrible. They don't know what they're spending on taxes, insurance, trash, landscaping, concessions. They don't have any of that stuff. So one of the rule of thumbs, if it's a property that's at least 20, 30 years old, then we're going to say from day one, we're going to look at the income that it's producing, and we're going to just automatically say, hey, we're going to count 50% going toward expenses for maintenance, property management fees, insurance, taxes, vacancies. And we're going to underwrite without having those specific numbers for the maintenance, the property management fees, taxes, insurance, vacancies, that we can just take 50% of the NOI, not the NOI, but 50% of the gross rental income and write it off of expenses, and then do the rest of our calculations so we can do the math and see. Because if it works at a 50% expenses, now you can go in and dig a little deeper and look to go more information. But these rules of thumb are set to help you save you time as you dig into the numbers, where to kind of see if it's even worth your time based off what the numbers are telling you, if it's worth even exploring further, just based off some of these things. So if a property generates $3,000 in monthly rental income, expect around $1,500 to be spent on expenses. In this case, it doesn't work directly for single family. Your expenses aren't going to be that high for single family rentals, but when you start looking at the expenses for larger properties and that are older, that is when you start getting around the 45% to 50% with expenses. And the thing is, like, maintenance and expenses in Los Angeles, California are definitely going to be higher than in Montgomery, Alabama. So that's one of the things too, as you go through and you look at more and underwrite more properties, you're going to have a good feel on what in your market area, what people are paying for these different expenses. So you're going to see what they're paying for property management. You're going to see kind of what the tax rate is. You're going to see what people are paying for insurance, what the vacancy rate is across your market. As you get more and more intimately familiar with it, the more you underwrite deals that you'll be able to move with speed. And so just multiply 0.05 times the rental income, and that'll kind of let you know what's left over after expenses to kind of work and start doing your calculation. Cash on cash return is just the annual return on investment based off the cash you invested. So if you invest $50K and your property generates $5,000 in net operating income annually after your expenses, then you're getting a 10% return on your money each year, which is pretty good for most people. Cap rate rule, we just talked about this one, how to calculate the cap rate. Whereas that you're going to go through the NOI, you're going to divide it by the purchase price that you're looking to pay, and then that's going to give you the cap rate that you can take that and just compare that to other transactions in the area and just kind of see where you are on the scale of what you're about to pay for this building. Gross rent multiplier is a quick way just to kind of look at the overall rental income and divide it by the property's purchase price, and it gives you kind of the annual gross rental income. So some people use this as a metric. I like cash on cash return as my primary metric, but there's another way of looking at data, just, okay, your annual rental income divided by your property price to kind of see where that comes on the scale in regards to the gross rent multiplier. Debt coverage ratio is just, hey, looking at how much income your property is producing and its ability to cover the mortgage payment out of the net operating income. So usually right now, most lenders want at least a 1.2. So if you're producing $50,000 annual is your net operating income for that property, and your annual mortgage payments are $40,000, then your DCR would be 1.25. So for every dollar that you pay for your mortgage, you're actually producing $1, or you're bringing in $1.25, $1.25. So 1.25%. So NOI divided by the annual debt service. So you guys have these slides, so you can kind of go back and do some practicing as you go through these metrics. Rule of 72. So this just tells you the time required for an investment to double in value. So you simply divide this by 72 by the annual growth rate to determine the approximate number of years. So if your building is appreciating 6% per year, it would take approximately 12 years. So 72 divided by 6 for the value to double. And so it's just kind of a quick rule of thumb that you can look at, like, hey, in this area, if we get this type of appreciation, that this is kind of how to double. And so that's just one metric that you can look at and have in your back pocket. And then now just kind of going through and just showing you people who's leveraged real estate to become really, really wealthy. Leading the pack, when you go look at some of this data that, Donald Brand, $16 billion net worth, Forbes, richest real estate mogul for 2022. John Sobredo, Silicon Valley powerhouse. He's got $11 billion net worth. He's a teenage entrepreneur turned billionaire. Been in the game a long time, clearly. Stephen Ross turned from a tax attorney to real estate tycoon worth $8 billion. Affordable housing advocate turned billionaire developer. Neil Bloom, Chicago's real estate luminary, net worth $6 billion. Chicago real estate whiz entrepreneur. Okay. Jeff Green, real estate investment genius, net worth $7 billion. He profited from the housing market downturn. Looks like he's in the Senate or something running there. We got his Jeff Green from Florida there. And you see that it's just different people building wealth. Who's the last guy? Let's go back. We don't want to skip over him. Sam Zell, real estate and beyond, net worth $6 billion, from real estate to diverse investments. That the thing that you have to look at, then you could be right here, REI Genius Millionaire. And where your net worth is, that, hey, coming from nothing to something. And that's the thing that we're looking to do. Like, we're seeing the blueprint is the math. I told you, we just add, subtract, and multiply and divide, and that's it. And you just plug the numbers in, you go through, and you make some judgment calls on the risk level, the risk tolerance, and then you look at get creative and put the deal together and just do it and consistently do it. That you could be, because every one of those people that you looked at, that we just looked at and clicked through, each and every one of them, they only have 24 hours in a day, and each one of them put their pants on one leg at a time. That they're no different than you and I. They just made decisions and along the way and committed to the process. And they probably did a lot of networking, had the right connections, and had the right being in the right environment to set them up for success. And they took advantage of different opportunities that they have. And so that's the thing that we're looking to do, to go out here and try to make our own opportunities and take advantage of those to continue to build our own real estate portfolios. And I'm a true testament that it is possible to do it. Even while you're working a 9-to-5 job, you can allocate time to it. I did a video this morning after I left the gym, just talking about how I gave up sport, fantasy football, and just being all in. I had to watch my Lakers every night, watching games, staying up late. It's like, hey, I'm wasting so much time on sports when I could be building my own assets. I could be having my own team and building my own portfolio to hand down to my generation, instead of me sitting here watching other people living their best life and living their dreams, that I can go out here and build my dreams. And that was the decision and the commitment that I made back in 2013 timeframe. And it was one of the best decisions that I ever made, with being able to take this serious and get in the game and be consistently showing up ever since. And so, dive into your notes, into the worksheets. In the Facebook group, make sure you join the Facebook group and just share kind of your takeaways. Get on video. I'm going to make you uncomfortable. You got to become comfortable being uncomfortable. Get in the Facebook group, introduce yourself, and let everybody know kind of what's your biggest takeaway from the session tonight. And then let them know, hey, going forward, what's your number one top goal over the next 5 years? And because the big thing is, like, you got to get uncomfortable. And guess what? The more people that you tell what it is that you're building, what it is that you're doing, guess what? The more people who know that can look out and help you become successful. So I challenge you guys to do that. I'm going to be actually going through and watching each and every one of the videos myself and going through. And and I look forward to tomorrow. And we're going to dive in. We're going to keep this thing going. Was tonight beneficial to you guys? I'm going to go through here and answer these questions in the chat for those that want to stay around. I'm going to answer those questions. But did you guys find tonight beneficial? I know usually I don't go through the numbers and kind of walk through, but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, it definitely opened my eyes to more questions as well, too, though.
Okay. No, that's exactly what it's supposed to do. That's good. That's good. And tomorrow we're going to dive into more of the strategies for financial success, the different strategies that you can leverage, how to manage risk, and then some of the legal side of it too, with kind of understanding some of the how you set up everything with your LLC, the operating agreement, your private placement memorandum, and your promissory note, and just kind of going through that and share a little bit about just that process. And we're going to talk about my millionaire success formula and break that down for you guys as well too. So super excited for tomorrow night. But for those that are still on, I'm gonna go through here and look at the questions that we have in the chat. Did you know Baltimore is giving away homes for $1 to encourage people to fix and live there? Yes. Yep. No. Thanks for that, Oliver. Yes. Yeah. They're giving properties away for $1. That you get in there. It's all about, hey, build your team, getting the construction crew together, getting your capital that you need for the investment, and getting after it. That it's a great opportunity to improve some of those neighborhoods. I think it's a long-term play just because the property values are so, a lot of those areas are so depleted that it's going to be a couple of years probably as more and more people come in and kind of change over the entire neighborhood. But I think if you can get the right capital in there to do the improvements, that it's going to be a good long-term play. We just saw that right now, Baltimore was number one for the job growth. So I think that's a good investment in the right area. But that's something to look at. Christian said, when you talked about commercial property, what is your opinion on car washes? It's a niche that I think any of the trailer parks, RV parks, car washes, that you look at, like the devil's in the details. If you can get really good and figure out the niche, where the market trends are going, that you can make it profitable. Because guess what? Most of the people in the area, I don't even like, nobody washes their car. I can't even remember the last time that I washed my car. And so like, if you're in a good area where it's job growth and people have really high paying jobs, and they don't have time. They're spending time with their kids or they're working, that they don't have time to wash cars. That I think car wash is a great business. And I would say even having a concierge car wash where you can go and wash their car at their home, that people with money, they'll pay a premium for that. Especially if they have like a luxury car or a collectible or something where you just come to the house, they don't have to drive and you come and you get it cleaned up. So yeah, I think that's definitely a good opportunity in the right area. And do your research. That was what I'm talking about. I want to own my own NBA, NFL team. Let's go, Christian. I got to send you a message too. There's a great meetup happening in 2 weeks down in Vegas too that I ran across today. I got to send that to you. So much information. Need to watch it one more time for sure. And let us know those questions. And tonight was great. Awesome. Thank you for that feedback. Lots to learn, lots to go through. It's a process. Don't be intimidated. It's a process. Go through if you don't understand it. Ask those questions in the chat. We'll get an answer and follow it up with you guys, and we'll look at maybe having some time to kind of go through and further explaining the areas. And came across a 22 unit, which is comprised of 4 buildings. Seller is open to seller finance, under 50% rented out, going to need repairs, additional property next to it. Much to do, still earn. Hey, that sounds like a deal. You want to buy distress because you got a motivated seller. That's number one that you want to have. And you got opportunity, whereas that if it's in the right area, you can go in and renovate those units that's down, that 50% of the units, renovate them over the next 2 months, start leasing them up, increase the income of the asset, and look at doing a refinance in less than a year, just because you're able to go in and renovate half of the complex in a short amount of time. And then you can move people out of the old units into those if they want to, or you will have attrition over time as people leases come up, and then you just rent those up. You renovate those other units and then lease it up completely. And then you go refinance it and pay off the seller and get some money in your pocket tax free, and you're good. So no, I think that's definitely a viable deal. You should probably look at, depending on the area. We want to look at the cap rate. You want to look at the potential. What's the market rent for that area for a renovated unit? So you can go in and calculate what it will produce after you renovate it. And then you want to understand, what are the costs to renovate it? Do you have to get new water heaters, new HVACs in every unit, new flooring, paint, new roofs, and just see what's the current condition and how much money is it going to take to renovate it, to bring it up to today's standards. And then from there, you want to just do the math and see, hey, what if I had to put $300,000 into it and I know it's going to be worth $2 million at the end of the day? Then hey, I may buy it for $1 million. Just say, hey, I'm gonna buy it for $1 million. I need you to hold back $200,000. I'll pay you back in 2 years. We're gonna buy it for $1 million. We're gonna raise $300,000, and we're gonna be all in $1.3 million, and we're gonna refinance it at $2 million at 80% loan to value. We're gonna say 70% loan to value. So we're gonna get a loan for about $1.4 million, and now we're gonna pay that 1.3 off, and then we're gonna take that $100,000 tax free, put it in our pocket, and go do another deal. And so that's kind of how that process goes. We just understanding the renovations. Once you find a deal, what you need to do to improve it, and then looking at the debt with the refinance and how you're going to bring the money together. And then it's just a matter of executing, getting the right contractor, and managing the project, so you can go through and refinance or sell. But I'm really big on holding the asset, because that's how you build wealth. If you can figure out a way where you and a small group of individuals can own for long term, where you're not having to sell in 3 to 5 years, then you're going to be in good shape. And guess what? You do this 2 or 3 times where you're making you're bringing in $4,000 or $5,000 a month. You don't need to do that a whole lot of times. You do that 3 times and you're bringing in 10, 12,000. You can stop if you want to. You're good. You won. You're out of the rat race. And so that's the thing that I really, really love about multifamily and just the opportunities, just like Brother John just laid out right there. When you get a 22 unit, you put a deal like that together when somebody's willing to finance it for you, seller finances, like there's no better opportunity for the right price. But that's where it all starts. I can't give enough thanks for being a part of this community and for you, Johnny and Faye. No, I definitely appreciate that, Jeannie. We appreciate you, and no, it's an honor just to be here because I'm a true believer that iron sharpens iron, and we want to be around the right people that's looking to build, that's looking to grow, and that's what we're doing. So I'm not gonna belabor the time. It's 9:30. I appreciate you guys rocking with me tonight. I'll see you tomorrow night. Super excited, and make sure you drop that video in the Facebook group. Introduce yourself. Tell somebody your biggest takeaway tonight, and then what's that big audacious goal that you're looking to set going into the next 5 years. Hopefully, I got some things that's getting the gears turning and getting the wheels turning in your head on what you can do and how you can better position yourself in the future to build wealth. That's it, and I will see you guys tomorrow night. Be blessed.